So we've talked about taking our code and writing it, storing it in a text file, but we need to look at the other avenue, the reverse, taking that data and reading it back into our code so that we can use it in our programs and manipulate it in ways that we need. So it's a very similar process, except one kind of big coding idea that we're going to just lightly touch on. So I've got a button and I want to load, I want to read some data. And what data am I reading? Well, I've got this text file, and we've been using this method where we use commas to separate important pieces of data or distinct pieces of data. So I've got a character name, Tom, I've got his class, which is a warrior, and I've got his level. So the first word means the name, the second word is his class, and the third word is his level. This file is stored in this folder, so therefore I have a string for this file using that location, which we've talked about before. So how do I read this data? How do I fetch this data from this text file? Well, when I click load, I am going to read this data. So I'm going to create a function called read data, or read file, I should say. It's a more universal name. And when I click, I want to call this function. So I click the load button, and we're going to actually write code to read that file. So much like writing data, reading data requires us to actually go into the file and look at what's in there. So we're going to use the using keyword again. And this next line of code is almost the exact same, except instead of using StreamWriter, we're not writing to a file. We're going to use StreamReader. And I'm just going to give it an arbitrary SR name. And I got to do new StreamReader. And which file are we reading to? Well, this file, which is being stored in this string. So I need to put file name there. So this will allow me to go into the file, but now I actually have to read the contents of the file. So I gotta basically suck this out of the file. So the easiest way to go about that is to take all of this data and put it in a string. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm going to make a string, and you don't have to give it such a convoluted name, but I'm going to, just because we're explaining it here. I'm going to call this string entire line of text. You would probably not use that big of a name in actual programming, but just to show you, just to be really explanatory. So that entire line of text, I can get it by using the StreamReader and using the read line method. This will read the entire line. So this entire line, if there is more text, as long as that line goes, we're going to suck all of that text into this string. Now, this entire text in one string is not very useful to us because it is storing three distinct pieces of data. It's storing a name, it's storing a class, it's storing a level. So not much use is having all of that data in one single string. So I am going to very lightly introduce arrays to you. Arrays, A-R-R-A-Y-S. Let me write this line of code and then explain it. So an array is kind of like a variable. I'm going to, it's data, it's text, it's strings. So I'm going to make a string variable, except this little square brackets signify that it is an array. And I'm going to call this array, this variable, each piece. Not the best name, but please just bear with me here. And what do I need this string to do? I need it to hold each piece. I need that piece, that piece, that piece. I need all three pieces separate. And where are these pieces being separated? They're being separated by a comma. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the entire string, so the entire line of text, I'm going to take that. However, I'm going to split it into pieces. I want 1 piece, 2 piece, 3 piece. And where am I going to split it? Wherever there's a comma. That's why we've been storing data with that comma. Now just be careful here, because you have to tell your computer where to split it. And you tell it by putting it inside a pair of single quotations. So where are we splitting this data? Well, I'm splitting it where the commas are. So I'm going to put a comma just like that. All right, let's elaborate on this line of code just a bit further, because I'm just throwing arrays at you and you've never heard of arrays. This was the line of text in the text file. I needed to separate 1, 2, and 3. I needed to separate each piece of data. So I created an array. An array you can think of like a variable, except we know variables as storing 1 piece of data. An array can store multiple pieces of data. So I can store more than just Tom. I can store more than just Warrior. I can store more than just 60. I can store all 3 pieces into a single variable. It's not a variable, but I'm going to keep using that word because we're familiar with it. So this array, this variable, each piece, is storing Tom, Warrior, and 60. It's storing all 3 pieces. So the last question we have to use is, well, how do I access each piece? How do I access Tom? How do I access Warrior? How do I access 60? Well, if we break this array up into its 3 pieces, we can give each piece a number. And I'm kind of disliking myself for using 1, 2, and 3 when I was first explaining this, because when you use arrays, you start at 0. So we would call this piece the 0 piece. It's in slot 0. It's in index 0. Warrior goes to index 1 and 60 goes to index 2. So it's 0, 1, 2. If I had more data in my text file, we would have a 3rd index, we would have a 4th index, we would have as many indexes as we possibly would need. In this program, I need to read in the name of the character, which is a string. I need to read in the class of the character, and I'm going to have an integer to hold the level of the character. So name, I need to get Tom. Character class, I need to get Warrior. Level, I need to get 60. So I know that all of those 3 pieces are being stored in this variable, this array. So let's do one at a time. Name, the name of that character, I need to read it from that array. So how do I do that? Well, because it's in the 0 index of this array, and my array is called each piece, I just need to say I'm interested in the 0 index. That is the first piece of that array, the first slot. Similarly, character class is being stored in the 2nd slot, the 2nd index, but that's going to be denoted by the number 1. Because we start at 0, we go to 1. So that is in index 1. And the last piece is for my level, which is stored in index 2. Now, each piece, this array is a string array, so the same rules still apply. Level is an integer. Each thing in here is a string. So if I want to get rid of that line, I do have to hit it with the old parse, just like we've done many times before, but this time using a piece from an array, an index from an array. And now you have all three distinct pieces of data from your text file. You've read them and you've stored them in three variables that you can just use and make your program and do what you want with them. And just a little side comment, I have told you guys that it's a good idea to close your stream readers or your stream writers previously, and obviously your stream readers. It's a good habit, but this using block will close it for you. So this is a bit redundant, but I still think that it's a good idea to just burn it into your brain that I need to be closing these things once I'm done with it. Anyways, not important, but just something to be aware of.